Hi everybody, I'm Zilla Blitz and welcome. Today we're going to do an overview of Sword Siege Crusades Book 1 from Wargame Design Studio. If you are a fan of Hex Encounters PC wargaming and you're a fan of medieval combat, this very well might be the game for you. Now, we're going to jump in and take a look at the game in a minute, but let's just do a brief overview of what we're looking at. So if you're not familiar with Wargame Design Studio, they've been in business since 2016, making Hex Encounters wargames. They have dozens of wargames spanning 8 different series. So there's Panzer battles, Panzer campaigns for World War II. There's some musket and pike series, a naval campaign series. There's also a Napoleonic series. This is their new 9th series and the first game in that series. The series, as we can see above, is called Sword and Siege, and this game is Crusades Book 1, which focuses on combat in and around the Crusades from 1098 AD to 1148 AD, sorry. Now, let's do a brief overview of this game and what you're going to get inside of it. First up, there are 64 scenarios, as well as a campaign game generation system that can allow you to play kind of mini campaigns where the outcomes are already predetermined, kind of a story-like mode, or one where literally you can manually fight out every battle in a sequence of a campaign where the subsequent battle is based on how well you did on that previous battle. In this game, each turn is 10 minutes, and a hex is 40 meters wide, and then I would say the average number of men per counter is about 100 men per counter. Now, there is a lot to talk about. Let's jump in and take a look at the game and give an overview of what we've got. I fired up the starter scenario, which is basically a scenario that walks you through, with the help of a written document, it walks you through all of the kind of the basic functions to working through a turn. And we'll talk a little bit about the turn sequence and some of the mechanics in a moment. But first, let's take a little bit of a look at what kind of units and stuff we have in these scenarios and games. First up, you could have a battle or a siege, and some of the sieges have battles attached to them. So there's a great variety among those 64 different scenarios in terms of what types of combat you'll see. This starter scenario has the units in white are the Crusader Alliance attacking here Maratha Numan, and the darker green units are the Islamic Alliance that are defending the city itself. So I've zoomed in here so we can get a little bit of a closer look at what kinds of things are in these battles. There is all kinds of stuff. We've got various types of weapons to destroy the city walls and city towers and gates, things like catapults and battering rams. We can see here just north of the north gate this siege tower that you roll up and troops climb up into it and try to go on top. One of the key aspects of the besiegers is you have to open the gates, and you can either break them apart with battering rams and catapults, or you can send troops up on like one of these siege towers, up over the top, down the other side, then open the gate so all your troops can pour into the city. These are usually objectives in a lot of the sieges in terms of taking control of these gates are kind of the pathway towards victory. A lot of other traditional units. Now we can see on the left-hand side, we can see a line of Crusader knights, heavy armored knights. We've got archers scattered all around here. There is these Islamic faction units that we can see very far down on the bottom left are mounted archers, but there are just an incredible variety of units in the game. The besieger, the defenders can also have things like oil that they can drop down on the sieging armies. We can see the moat here around the city. There are leaders, there are supplies, spears, all kinds of goodness, just an incredible variety to cover these different 64 scenarios of types of units that you would see. I want to kind of give a little bit of an outline of the mechanics of the game and the complexity. This is a very meaty game. It's not incredibly complex to play and understand the basics. It took me about a half an hour to get through the basics of this starter scenario, and I feel like now I've got pretty much everything I need to know to start playing into these scenarios. There are also, in addition to this starter scenario, 4 of the 64 scenarios are training scenarios where you work up in complexity and kind of work on assaulting and executing sieges and battles and elements of key to gameplay. But although it is a relatively straightforward system to be able to execute, there are a lot of subtleties and complexity to gameplay. It comes with a 114-page rulebook that you can use to kind of dig into as you kind of explore the system more. The sequence of play has 4 options. The default one is a move and fire. So if we were the Crusaders here, we can move our units around and fire our units that can fire. And then after that, there's also an opportunity fire that you can be subjected to by the defenders. Then after that, there is a melee phase, and then it lather, rinses, repeat. The Islamic Alliance would do their move and fire, and then their melee, and we go through a series of turns. So it's all turn-based with those basic 2 stages that are in there. There's other things to note: command and control, fatigue, morale, supply, unit quality. There's phases. There are cavalry charges. There are overruns. There is disorder, fog of war if you want to turn in. A lot of these things are tweakable and assignable. Formations, bridge repair, skirmishes, routing, you name it. It's all here and all explained in the rulebook and part of some, if not a good number of these scenarios. So that's a little bit of a visual overlook and a little bit of a talk of the game. I want to go through now and show some of the scenarios to show the different types of scenarios that are in the game. One thing I wanted to show too is there are also 3 default zoom levels for this game. This is the third, the close-in 2D zoom level. If we come back here, we get a wider view of the map and the city. And then for some of these larger campaigns, actually, these maps span more than the width of your screen. But this is the zoomed out view that gives you a more strategic look at the game. Now, we can zoom back into this middle one. This is the one I seem to like at the moment. But there are also 2 3D modes. So there is, we zoom in this way, we can see a 3D mode of the game, and then an even closer 3D mode where you can see the walls and apparently see wall damage much better. I find this a little bit visually challenging. I think my favorite is actually the simplicity and clarity of this 2D mode, but of course you can play the game with ever mode and kind of ever view and visual aspect you like. Let's do a scenario tour now. This is one of the 4 scenarios that are set around Nicaea. We can see, because some of these sieges lasted a long time, so you can play scenarios at various points in the siege. This is, of course, we can see the Islamist faction is holed up in the city itself, and the Crusaders are approaching here from the south. We've got 2 long lines of Crusader forces arriving at the city. We can zoom out on this. We can see this is a much bigger map than we had in that short and small training scenario. A great variety of scenarios here. I mean, some big and some small. We've got ships out in the ocean as well. Lots of gates and ways that you can think. And we'll notice here in terms of, we look at this Islamic Alliance, you know, they've got catapults and archers just lined on the walls here to devastate the Crusaders as they arrive. So it's important to note too that there's not only just sieges in this game. This is an open field battle, the Battle of Dorylaeum, one of the 2 scenarios for the Battle of Dorylaeum. We can see Crusader forces in a ring here, surrounded by, on 3 sides at least, Islamic forces. Tons of archers here approaching from 3 different sides. So the outnumbered and beleaguered Crusaders here have to hold off a much larger force here. We can zoom out, we can see this is a pretty large map, but tons of archers and mounted forces coming up here for the Islamic Alliance. This is a rather large one here. This is the 2nd scenario and involving the siege of Antioch. And what we're seeing here is the city of Antioch is to the east here, largely abandoned by the Crusader alliance that was in the city itself. And what's happened here, they are on the verge of starvation. They've run out of food. And then kind of a story involving a soldier that proclaimed to have found the actual lance that pierced Christ's side, infused the army with morale, and they sallied forth from the citadel itself to try to break out of the siege. So we can see these are the Crusader forces trying to crack through this wall of Islamic forces that have kind of tried to contain them within the city for, I think, 9 months or so. So this battle takes this, and there are 3 scenarios at Antioch itself. So a lot of these maps you have opportunities to fight multiple battles on. To the shores of Tripoli for this one. This is a Crusader alliance attacking Tripoli. There are 3 scenarios involving this city. We can see heavily fortified Islamic Alliance walls and a rather large Crusader force. But this in itself is, a relatively modest scenario when you look at the number of troops involved compared to that last one we saw with Antioch, which probably had twice the number of troops on it. But again, gives you an idea of the incredible variety here. This is a very different tactical challenge here for the Crusaders, as they can really only attack this eastern wall here, and it is heavily defended with catapults and various types of siege weaponry, as well as laden with archers coming in. And the Crusaders have some siege weapons here to try to break through and crack the wall and try to take Tripoli. Here's another scenario with an interesting twist to it, the Siege of Tyre. So we've got the Islamic Alliance hold up in Tyre itself, a relatively small city, as we can see here, with Crusader Alliance forces outside the gates trying to break down. But then to the east, we have a rather large relief force for the Islamic Alliance pouring in from the east. So the Crusaders' challenge here is to, well, it depends on which side you're playing, but you have to both defend yourself from this counterattack to the east, as well as hopefully succeeding in taking the city itself. This one looks epic. It's really kind of two battles in one. Jerusalem, a couple of scenarios involving the sieges of Jerusalem. Here we can see a rather large Islamic alliance inside the city. Now, one quick point about these views I'm showing them. I've got both sides set to manual, so the fog of war is off for these views. Normally, if you're one side fighting against the other and you have fog of war turned on, you're not going to see all the units on the other side. So as the Crusaders, you probably wouldn't see a lot of the units inside the city itself. And likewise, if you're the Islamic defenders playing as that side, you're not going to see most or many of the outside attacking forces until they get within line of sight. We can see a massive horde of Crusaders on the outside and a significant army of defenders inside the city. One thing I like about this too, there's a good mix of small and large scenarios. This is a smaller battle, the Battle of Ramla, and here we can see a modest defending force of the Islamic Alliance here with again a rather small attacking force for the Crusaders here. So a nice scenario that you can probably play in a minimal amount of time, especially good as kind of a training scenario as you're building your way up to some of those, understanding how some of those larger scenarios work. Here's a medium-sized scenario, Battle of Azaz. So we have some Crusaders holed up in the city, getting besieged by the Islamic Alliance, and then to the south, the relief force here, rather large relief force of Crusader forces making their way, trying to break the encirclement of Azaz and save the day. So again, you get a sense for, we've got large scenarios, small scenarios, medium scenarios. There is just a wide range of stuff involved in this game. Lastly, I wanted to show one of the training scenarios. This is training scenario number 2. I mentioned earlier there were 4. There are actually 5. They increase in size and complexity as you go up, all involving learning how to practice some of the things that you're learning with siege tactics. So a really good, I think, thoughtful pathway to working up to some of the larger and the medium scenarios. You don't have to feel overwhelmed with starting right out with a full scenario. You've got these training scenarios that you can build your way up into. This is probably also a good time to talk a little bit about the options for gameplay. You can play, I noticed a lot of these scenarios say that it is recommended if you're playing as a human to play one side or the other. Some of the scenarios you can play both, so they do have sometimes a preferred human side to play against the AI, but they are all playable from both sides against the AI. You can also play hot seat, moving that way, and there is a play by email option too, where you can send your moves on. And for that one, they recommend using the default sequence of play, as that has the fewest number of sendings that you would need to have back and forth. So there you have it, an overview of Sword and Siege Crusaders Book 1, Hex Encounters Medieval Combat from Wargame Design Studio. Now, I know people are going to say, I want to see gameplay. I will be back. I've played through the initial starter scenario and kind of got my feet wrapped around the general mechanics and movement and stuff like that, which worked really well to understand that. I want to learn more about command and control and some of the aspects of morale and charges and overruns. I've got a few little pieces that I'm not 100% clear on to be able to play a full scenario yet. So I'm going to work through a couple of the training scenarios. There are 4 of those, I think, after the starter scenario. Once I get those done and get a little bit better of a handle on the mechanics in the game, I'm going to come back and show a full scenario. So I'll be posting another video, and as soon as that video is ready, I will put it up here. I'll put a link to it there, and I'll be back because I definitely know I get it. We want to see gameplay, and I'm going to show some gameplay for this one. Really excited to dig into this one. I think it's pushing all the buttons. It looks like just a fantastic job, and so much stuff inside. I mean, we looked at maybe 10 scenarios and there are 64 of them. So lots of gameplay in this one. Let me know if you've got questions. I'd be happy to answer them. Thanks. Bye.